That'd be pretty good. Hey, welcome back to Filled with the Spirits.
What spirits are we being filled with today? Liquid spirits.
So today we're going to be filled, hopefully, with 3 spirits. One is the Bushmills Black Bush, and the second is so this is new and interesting that I found today, actually. And so this is a Bushmills 12-year age statement, single malt Irish whiskey. And here's the interesting part. It was aged in Oloroso sherry and bourbon casks before being finished in Marsala cask, giving this triple wood single malt whiskey its dried fruit and cherry flavors. So I'm looking forward to trying that. So in case you're unfamiliar, Black Bush is a sherry cask whiskey. And so besides being filled with these 2 spirits, we're hoping to also be filled with...
I'm already filled with the Holy Spirit.
The Holy Spirit, that's right. As we talk... yep. As we talk about, after we get done talking whiskey, we will talk about an interesting topic, hopefully to you. It will be to Jason and I. Whether it is interesting to you as well is another whole issue. But
so grab yourself a glass of preferably Bushmills if you have something. If not, maybe another Irish whiskey. We're drinking Irish whiskey
That's
today.
right.
And
Bushmills
if not,
is an Irish whiskey.
Maybe a glass of milk, Baptist wine, whatever it takes.
Yeah, like... That's the great thing is you don't necessarily have to be a partaker of these spirits to be filled with the same spirit that we already are filled with. So
there you go. So this is the Bushmills Black Bush. This is, as you said, a sherry cask. I've had this before. I didn't realize it was a sherry cask, which is interesting.
So they have so there's traditional Bushmills, which is a blend, okay, and it's kind of their. It's their cheapest one, so I don't want to say it's the low end of their, series. But then they have Red Bush, which is aged in bourbon casks, and then Black Bush, which is aged in sherry casks, and then we have this really interesting one that seems to be aged in 3 different casks. Well, aged in 2 and finished in 1, but. It seems like it's going to be exciting and new.
Yep. You're like, let's drink the Black Bush now so we can finish it.
That's right.
I've had the Black Bush before. I like it. It's not very expensive, which is nice.
Yeah. So this Black Bush was pretty close to about half the price of this other bottle. So,
so that's got like a almost chocolatey finish to it. It's sweet up front. Not a typical Irish whiskey. I mean, I guess
the smell reminds me of like spice cake a little bit.
Okay.
Like if you had a spice, like a cinnamon apple cake or something like that.
Yep, I see that. It doesn't have, again, what I call the grassy notes from Irish whiskeys. Right. I don't get that. Probably the sherry, I guess, is what's covering that up.
Yeah, maybe the sherry cask finish kind of changes it some. But it has a great smell. I mean, it's still... So one of the great things about Irish whiskeys that I like is how light they are. I don't mean they have less alcohol. I just mean they don't dominate your palate.
Yeah, they're usually very light in color, which oftentimes light in color means light on your palate as well. This is a 40%, so that's 80 is 80 proof. I guess is 40% 80 proof.
That's right. 40% is 80 proof.
Pretty low for... I'm not low, but like...
No. But, well, here's the deal.
Coming from the bourbon world, that's low.
A lot of the stuff that you buy that is just the common whiskey from a distillery is going to be 40% ABV, right? It's their special ones where they start to amp up the ABV.
Okay, so in coming from the bourbon world, that usually starts at like 90. Okay. And then, because an 80 proof whiskey or 80 proof bourbon is kind of like, what are you doing? Like, that's not very good. Like, usually I'm looking at about 90 proof until you get the bottle in bond. Then you're looking at 100 proof, and then just cask strength. You just go up from there. Right. Yeah. So 80 is I don't know. I mean, I'm sure people will correct me on this. I don't know of any decent bourbons that are under 90 proof. Usually, if they're 80, they're going to be a cheaper bottom shelf type of deal.
So what I would tell you is, with a lot of the European whiskeys, a lot of the common ones you're going to get are going to be they're going to be around 40% ABV. I'm pretty sure Macallan 12, which is a pretty common Scotch, right? Macallan 12 is the go-to Scotch for people that have never really had much Scotch variety.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure it's 40% ABV.
Yeah, I was going to say like 80 to 90 proof.
Yeah,
is kind of the
that's that sweet spot for most stuff.
Yep.
If you drink a lot of whiskey, like Jason and I may or may not do, you tend to start to gravitate towards cask strength whiskeys, and so they will cask them somewhere between 50 and 60% ABV. By the way, let's make sure we clarify some of these terms. ABV stands for alcohol by volume. So 50% ABV means it's half straight alcohol and half some water-based substance, right? And so, like, I would say generally most of the bottles on my shelf are not 40% ABV.
Yep. Yeah, and typically, I guess, when you have a higher proof... Oh, okay, so like this 80 proof... They could put this same product out exactly the same, but do it probably at 100 proof, because it's coming out of the barrel much higher than that.
Right.
And they're watering it down. That's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because you can water it down to taste.
Well, because if it's too much, well, so you and I've been through this with some other things that we had to water down, right?
Yep.
It was so high percent alcohol that you couldn't get all the flavors because that alcohol heat kind of dominated over them.
And a lot of times people will say just add a drop of water.
That's right.
And it'll
open it up because it just does a little dilution of the alcohol so that you can get the flavors that are lying there underneath. So, but my experience is a lot of the Irish whiskeys are going to be at 40% ABV, and there's several scotches that you'll buy. It's only when you start to buy special bottles that you get above that most of the time.
And the Irish whiskeys, I typically prefer at a lower... I don't know that I've ever had a high-proof Irish whiskey that I was, like, super happy about.
Have you ever had the Redbreast cask strength?
I have. I like the regular Redbreast more.
Right.
Which is odd.
Yeah, because it's not odd. The reality is...
Coming from bourbon, it's odd. There's not a single, like, cask strength bourbon that I've liked less than the...
But I think the point of Irish whiskey is to have that lighter side.
Yep.
I mean, you want to taste that shortbread flavor, that green apple flavor, and if it's super hot, in terms of that alcohol, that's right. Yeah. It kind of masks that to a certain extent.
I'm getting some of that shortbread here now.
Definitely.
It's a lot softer. Maybe that's the sherry cask.
Yeah, I think that's the sherry a little bit. That kind of like, I think that's what. So when I say I get a spice cake, probably what I'm getting is a combination of shortbread and like that cinnamon vanilla that you can get from the barrel sometimes.
Yep.
I mean, it smells great though.
That's a really solid bottle for the. I mean, that's what, a $35-$40 bottle.
I think at a liquor store that we would both consider a little bit expensive, it was $34.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's a great deal if you're looking for. I don't know.
Maybe that could be a daily drinker all the time.
Yep.
And the great thing at 40% alcohol by volume, you're not gonna wish you hadn't drank so much unless you just really drink.
Unless you just like, let's just drink. It's $35 a night. Let's just.
But I mean, I could have two of those on any given night and just be like, oh, that was great, and not feel any effects of it whatsoever. So
just to clarify, that's 2 pours, not 2 bottles. So.
Yes.
In case that wasn't
No.
clear.
I appreciate the clarification in case people think that I'm such a lush that I might drink 2 bottles on any given night.
2 bottles of the black.
My limit is definitely a bottle and a half, no matter what people say.
Yep, I'm a fan. I haven't had a bottle of that at home in a while, but I'll probably pick one of those up next time.
So for those of you who don't know the way we do things, we try to do 2 bottles from the same distillery if possible. So Bushmills, feel free to... to let us sample some of your other things. It was a couple years ago, 2019, when we flew to Germany to visit my son who's in the service. And in Heathrow Airport, they had a special Bushmills that you could only buy in the duty-free section.
You told me about that. I looked it up. I was supposed to be in England 2 weeks ago. I looked it up on Heathrow's website, the airport, because you can go and check out their
Were they out of
amazing sound. No, they had it. The problem is that I ended up not being able to go.
You didn't get to go. That's a shame.
They canceled our shoot. And Heathrow Airport's been a mess recently.
Oh,
so
I'm sure it has.
Anyway, I'm excited about this. But the one you were talking about has the steamships on the front of it?
Yeah, that's right. It's the Steamship Collection. So, man, I'd love to be able to sample that on air and tell people how they should go find it at the duty-free shops.
Yeah,
so.
Bushmills, This is also 40%. So that's nice. Same proof to test.
That's right. So we'll have the difference in flavor definitely won't be the alcohol content
and
here.
And the color of these are pretty similar.
Yeah,
that's
in terms,
maybe slightly
this
darker,
is a little bit darker,
not
for
not
sure.
a whole
lot. But it's also in a different bottle. I mean, I think it's
true.
really unique. When I saw it today at the store, I was just like, wow, that looks interesting. I've never seen that before.
I've not either.
And I was really excited to get it. So, ooh, I get a lot of apple smell.
Yep, I was going to say the green apple crispiness.
A lot of apple smell. I mean, not even green apple, just apple, like almost red cherry apple or something.
And the barrels again were the sherry and bourbon casks, and then finished in Marsala. Marsala. So when I hear Marsala, I think the chicken Marsala from the greatest Italian place in the world, which is Olive Garden. That's not true. Don't go to Olive Garden if you can go anywhere else.
Okay, listen, folks. I just want to point something out. Look, I have nothing against Olive Garden. If you love Olive Garden, that's great for you.
We just have something against you. No. Sorry, continue.
I can't believe Jason said the greatest Italian
It's
place.
not good. I mean, it's not good. Anyway, but that's what I think of
We have
Marsala.
a local place that I like to eat at because they allow me to bring my own bottle of wine. So
I'm guessing Marsala is a wine. That's probably why they called it the chicken Marsala. It probably had a white wine sauce or something.
I'm sure it's a white wine, which would explain the light and fruitiness of the taste. Very fruity.
Yeah. Aging something in a white wine barrel, I'm not sure.
Especially after it was aged in a bourbon barrel and a sherry barrel.
Yeah. Interesting.
So it is an
Unique.
interesting take. It's like an almost attempt to make sure that they lightened up the flavors after they put these heady flavors into it.
Have you tried it yet? I keep smelling it. It smells so good.
Yes, I have tried it. It's very fruity. I'm going to look up Marsala now. That's the great thing about phones and YouTube.
That's a unique. I don't even know how to describe that.
Marsala is a fortified wine.
Does that mean like a port? Is that a fortified wine?
No. So a fortified wine, and so I'm trying to see if it's. So generally, a brandy is when you double distill a wine. Okay, so you distill a wine. You distill any fermented fruit product, which wine is fermented grapes, right? Mm-hmm. That's a brandy. Okay, but a fortified wine is when you distill some of it and pour it back into the wine. So you have some wine and you have some distilled flavors from the wine, from the same wine.
Mix them back.
That's right.
Together.
You mix them back
That's
together.
Interesting.
So it's usually a higher alcohol volume.
Yep.
Because when you distill, that's what you're doing. You're boiling off the alcohol to catch it. And so you're going to have a much higher alcohol volume.
So are those like dessert wines? Is that where they would fall under a menu if you're out somewhere fancy?
I'm not sure. So not necessarily.
I guess I think of smaller, like higher ABV wines with smaller pours.
It says it could be dry or sweet.
Interesting.
But it's produced in Marsala, Sicily. So,
which is where they make the chicken that you get at Olive Garden.
But that's it.
It's
it is
not true.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they don't.
Pretty sure that's not where.
No,
that's
they
from.
might, because I'm pretty sure we're going to lose all the Olive Garden people here. But I'm pretty sure that everything Olive Garden serves was frozen. So
yeah, in Mississippi, trucked to wherever you are.
No, this is great. Like, I mean, so in terms of the Irish whiskeys that I've liked, I would put this bottle up there with the Redbreast. Like, Redbreast 12 is my quintessential Irish whiskey.
Yep.
But I'd love to taste them side by side at some point. In fact, we may have to do that. We may have to get our favorite Irish whiskeys and try them one after the other at some point.
I had that. We had that Redbreast, whatever the. What was the? It was a couple weeks ago. We did that. I still have a little bit of it in there, but that was totally different than the Redbreast 12.
Yeah, it was different. But I mean, Redbreast 12, Bushmills, Jameson. Those are the quintessential.
Yep.
You know, I like so I don't typically drink regular Jameson unless I'm. The nice thing about regular Jameson is if I'm at a restaurant and I want a whiskey,
they have it.
They're gonna have it. So
and you don't have to pay much for it.
And I generally like it. It's just not I don't have it at home. At home I have Jameson Black Barrel because I like that barrel candy flavor that I get from it. So, but this is pretty good. Like I could drink this. It's too expensive to drink every day, but
I'm not sure if I had that in a blind tasting. I'm not sure I would have
known the difference.
No, I'm not sure I would have known it was an Irish whiskey.
Oh yeah, why is that? What are you sensing?
I don't know how I would have characterized. It's not like any Scotch that I've had, but it doesn't have. I mean, again, the typical flavors that I get from I guess like a Jameson or a Redbreast 12, like a straight line, non-specialty Irish whiskey, right?
Right.
Because of I guess it's because of all the barrels it's been in. It's just got so many unique extra flavors happening to it, which I realize we haven't really talked about much of what those are. It's hard for me to characterize them. I mean, you're getting the apple.
I get a lot of apple, fruity. Yeah. Well, I'm getting a lot of fruit on the back end, almost like that. When you finish drinking apple juice and there's just a hint of sweet on the back end, it's almost like that. Here's what I don't get. This is a single malt. It says single malt on the bottom. I'm not getting any of the grainy effects that I'm typically tasting in single malts.
Yep.
And to be fair, to an extent, that's to its detriment. I like that grainy finish, that malty finish, where you can almost taste the liquid grain in there. Oh, yeah. That's what. So I miss that. It seems like the way they distill their single malt at Bushmills is in an Irish way. They're trying to make it lighter. They're almost scoffing at those Scots who want this heavy malty flavor. The Irish are like, oh, we like the light flavor. This is like Irish Spring.
Are they using a pot still? That's the typical Irish
way, right? So pretty much every distillery in Ireland, there's only a couple actually. They all distill from the same stills, but different companies. So like I'm going to use this. I'm going to use the still from this time to that time, right? And I'm going to make my stuff based on my recipe, and then because it's all about it's very little about the still. Excuse me, and it's all about the recipe in the mash.
The mash
right?
bill going into
it. But not just the percentages. It's about the actual specific grain. Like, if you and I both have a bunch of Munich malt, but you get your Munich malt from this place, it's going to taste different than my Munich malt from that place.
That's like with hops, with different, beers now with their IPAs that, you have breweries that'll have one IPA and they'll do a different hop from a different region, and then
it changes the flavor.
Very different flavor. Yeah.
So that's the way a lot of the Irish do it. Is that they're using the same still. They just have a slightly different mash, and then they finish it completely different.
Yeah,
right?
And that one's definitely finished completely different. I'm a fan. I like it. I would buy it if I saw it again. I've never seen that bottle.
No, me either.
So
today was the first day.
Yeah,
in fact, now you know the place that I found it because I told you.
Is that new place that?
That's right.
Yeah, I almost went there today.
I went there today, and I'm glad that I did, and I think they were pretty excited. And the guy thought, I think he wanted. So they also happen to have Blanton's and Eagle Rare in their little shelf behind the window, and I think the guy was hoping to be like, "Ooh, look if you come back enough, you can buy this." And he said, do you like bourbons? And I was like, I'm not really a bourbon guy. Yeah. He's like, he looked like I had just kind of barely pricked his balloon and it just started seeping out slowly. He was like so deflated.
Yep.
I was like, no. I'm a Scotch and Irish whiskey guy, and I just kept going back and forth and looking, and they had some interesting looking bottles. Some stuff that you might see at Total Wine, but then again, it might not be there.
Yeah. And this is a lot closer to us.
Oh yeah, it's way closer.
So by episode 315 or so, you'll like bourbon, because at some point we're gonna have to try some bourbon.
I'm thinking maybe the next episode we're gonna have to delve into bourbon, because
I've got
this is our second Irish. The only reason we hit Irish for the second time, that wasn't our original plan, but I found that bottle today, and so it was like,
I'm glad you
did. We need to try this. So yeah. So I tell you what, in one of the next two episodes, we have to hit some bourbon.
Okay.
And I'm gonna have to lean on you, because
you probably don't have any at your house, right?
That's not true. I have. Well, so
for when I come over, you've got one.
That's right. I have that Old Forester's 1920.
Okay.
Which is pretty decent.
Yeah,
but it's still
like
bourbon.
That. Yep.
And then I also have the Yellow Rose Outlaw Bourbon, which.
That's right.
Which is. It's kind of fun. Like my wife took me on a tour of that distillery for my birthday this last year, and it was pretty interesting. I went in there thinking I'm not going to buy anything, but I'm going to ask questions, and came out going, "This is great. I'm going to buy stuff." And I bought one of their bourbons, and I bought their blended whiskey, which I think is technically not a bourbon, because bourbon has to be more than 50% corn mash, and it has to be aged in a new oak barrel in the United States. And this is, they look for a certain flavor profile, but it doesn't necessarily fit the parameters to make it a bourbon. So anyway.
Well, we'll do it at some point. I got a couple of bottles of Blanton's that maybe at some point we'll open up just for you. I don't think I have any Eagle Rare at this point.
Well, I will say this. I have a son in Germany, and right now he sent me a picture of his little whiskey shelf, because so I have a son who's in the service, and he'll be getting out soon. And he is going to be sending home it's Turkish marble. So it's a Turkish marble, like wine rack and liquor table. It's really cool looking. I could show you a picture, but it would be rude, because then the rest of these people
wouldn't be able to see it.
Yeah. But on there he has a bottle of Blanton's that is about half empty, and a bottle of Blanton's Gold that has like one sip out of it.
I have a bottle of Blanton's Gold that I haven't opened since I went to Paris for work like 2 years ago. I still haven't opened it.
Nice. I did tell him, so he told me he can get Blanton's Gold. So they sell it at the liquor store that he goes to all the time.
I will buy one.
And I just told him, I said, if you really loved your dad.
That's if you really love your dad's friend.
If you really love your dad.
Look, if you love the podcast, send us.
That's right.
Yep.
I did send him a link to one of our episodes.
Oh, okay.
In hopes that he would watch it and give us a little feedback.
Send us a suitcase filled with.
That's right. I told him that
whiskey.
If he actually watched it, he had to make all of his Army friends like and subscribe.
Okay. All right, good.
So,
yeah, we got some delicious whiskey. What else do we got on the table for today?
So recently we have talked about Genesis, about the origins of man, and the debate between creationism et al. Right? And so I think today we're going to kind of bookend that a little bit with the talk of the end times,
the end of the universe.
That's right. What does Revelation mean to whom, and how should we interpret it, and how should we let that affect our daily lives? Now, to be fair, we have not spent hours and hours researching this topic, so we're definitely going on the fly. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you spent all last week reading Revelation.
Let me get my notebook out.
But I have not. So
with end time stuff, I think we did this with the other episode. Kind of recap a little bit, like what the overarching thoughts are. That you have your pre-mill, your post-mill, and your amillennial.
Let's quantify those a little bit. So when he says mill, he means millennial. That stands for 1,000 years. Because in the book of Revelation, it says, Jesus shall reign on earth for 1,000 years.
So then there's the people who say that. So the pre-mill is, I'm going to
It's okay.
completely ruined this. Do you have them?
We may butcher this because we know what we believe, but we can't necessarily characterize what other people believe accurately.
Yeah, so this is the point where you
So
hit
if
the
we're
pause
saying
button.
it wrong, feel free to say something in the comments.
Yeah,
to
just
us.
get mad at
We're
us.
not
It's
trying to
fine.
be authoritative. We're trying to give what we think they believe. So the
So basically,
pre-mill
if you're
people-
pre-mill, you don't love Jesus. I think is what. That's not. That is not it.
That's Jason Allison, folks. Jason Allison. You can cut that out. But
there's two versions of pre-mill. There's the historical pre-mill, and then there's the dispensational pre-millennial, and those are.
And that means we have not reached the 1,000 years of Jesus' reign yet, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. They'll tell us
Okay.
in the comments if that's
Right,
wrong, but I
of
believe
course.
that's correct. And then your post-mill is that it already happened.
Right. That Jesus' reign of 1,000 years has happened, and now we're seeing the fruit of man after Jesus has reigned for 1,000
Yeah,
years.
so the people who hold, at least the ones that I know that hold a post-mill, they would say that the world is continually getting more and more, they wouldn't use this word, but sanctified. The world is getting better and better and better until Jesus returns, because we are on the post end of that, right? So, and then the pre-mill people would say that the world is getting worse and worse,
Worse
and
and
worse.
worse, yeah.
Right. And then the on-mill people,
say we're in the 1,000 years of Jesus.
Is that what it is?
reign.
Okay.
I believe that's what all millennials mean.
I think not most people, a lot of people that I know hold to on-mill.
Yeah.
I know one post-mill person.
Basically, Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, "This is the way I expect the people of my kingdom to live." Okay? And the church, since he left, has... And a millennial is not a literal 1,000 years. It's a period of time.
It's someone born from like 1987 to 19... Okay. That's not...
Right.
That's different.
Yeah, sorry. That's the different
But
millennials.
But that's part of the conversation is it a literal 1,000
Right.
years, or is it a figurative? I mean, it goes back to, is this day in Genesis a 24-hour period? Is like, what is...
Yeah, but I think there's a distinct difference. Like, I think it's a lot easier to make the argument that Genesis is very literal.
That's true.
Because it's obvious that aspects of the book of Revelation... So the book of Revelation came about because John, the one whom Jesus loved, that's how he was described in the Gospel of John multiple times. He was exiled. Is that the right word?
To the island of Patmos?
Patmos, yeah.
It's different than Padme from Star Wars. It's a different... Sorry, continue.
Nice. Okay.
So he was exiled to the island of Patmos, right? And so then he had this vision, and then that's what the book of
That's right.
Revelation
The
is.
book of
Right.
Revelation is his account of the vision that God gave him, or Christ gave him, depending on your perspective. And so it's obvious that some of that is his interpretation of a vision. So there's a difference between being inspired to write something and writing your account of a vision, right? I would say that those are slightly different things. And so there are definitely things in, especially if you consider the book of Revelation to be prophecy, okay? I'm not saying you do. I'm just saying if the book of Revelation is considered to be prophecy, that means it's something to happen in the future. And I can't imagine how a guy like John would describe an airplane. Let's just imagine for a moment that literally he saw a vision of modern day. How would he describe the things that he sees today? I can't imagine that he would describe them in any way that really symbolizes what we're doing.
Yeah, you've got no reference point.
That's right. Because you're talking about going from not even cart and buggy, just a donkey.
Yeah, how do you describe a color?
Donkey.
A color that's never been made.
That's
like
right.
You can't do
Yes. Yeah, that's a great way. How would a blind man describe seeing a rainbow, right?
Yep.
At once I'm talking about his eyes have been opened and now he can see. How would he describe seeing a rainbow? Well, he wouldn't know how to describe it because he has no reference point. So it's way easier to believe that a lot more of the book of Revelation is figurative than the book of Genesis.
I think that's fair.
So I think that's where people struggle with how much of it is literal. Is any of it literal?
Yep.
And how much of it is figurative? Is there this person known as the Antichrist, or is the Antichrist the spirit that lives in all of us, where we don't want to do what Jesus requires of us?
Or there's some people that say the Antichrist is the Pope. Like, that's a big thing within Reformed circles.
Is it really?
It is. It's weird, but
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I hadn't either until that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. Or is there such thing as like the Antichrist, or is it an Antichrist?
Right.
Right. So there's a lot of that.
That's yeah.
So would you qualify yourself as to falling into one of those three camps? Because I wouldn't say that I fall into any of those camps. Maybe if I describe what I believe, then maybe somebody will be like, "Oh, you're actually this, or you're this, or you're that." Right.
So here's where I can go with that, and unfortunately, it's somewhat of a lazy answer. I will say that I grew up being taught that the end times will happen in a series of events very similar to what happened in the book series Left Behind.
Yep, that's what I was going to say.
Okay, and but it was upon reading that book series that I had kind of a personal epiphany that, first of all, like, I don't know how any person who understands history could not see these series of events like actually suggesting what's about to happen. And if you know what's about to happen, that's contrary. If you're not a believer in Jesus and you're not a follower of him, you should have no idea that the things that happen in the book series Left Behind mean that we're in the end times. I mean, right? If you knew, then you would
unless you're not a believer and you just like Kirk Cameron movies, then.
I forgot he did that movie. I was thinking of the books, but I did forget that Kirk Cameron did.
I read the kids series of the books when I was a kid. I remember being freaked out and being like, gotta always make sure you got your clothes on right, because they're just going to be left behind.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of legalism caught up in that. And it's a lot of, you have to do this, this, and this. And I think that's contrary to the revelation I have of what it means to live in Christ. There are certain things he wants me to do, but doing those things or not doing those things don't make me more or less worthy to be part of his kingdom, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so if there's a physical act you could do that could keep you out of God's kingdom, that's no different than there being a physical act you can do to put you into his kingdom, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that adds up. That makes me think of, like, during the Left Behind series thing, when that was going on as a kid. I remember hearing some friend was over and he said something about, like in California, they put like scanners before you go into stores, and it'll put the mark of the beast on your forehead, so you gotta be careful where you go. And I'm thinking, like,
right,
that's not good.
Yeah,
I was like, I know I got Jesus in my heart and I've been baptized and all this, but like,
I'd hate to get that.
But if I got a scan on my forehead, that'd be no good. Guess I just won't go to California. So I'd never been.
Hey, I've been there. I haven't seen those scanners.
No, that doesn't happen.
Maybe I have the mark and I just don't know.
So that's the Left Behind. I grew up with the same thing, right? Like, that was and I think that was big. Again, we've talked about this before, but we grew up, I think, in similar circumstances, and that was
but we grew up more than a decade apart. So,
but yes,
it does show you that there's some traditional culture out
there. Yes,
100%. That is misplaced or foul, if you want to say it.
That Left Behind perspective. So that would fall within the.
I think that's the pre-millennial.
It's the pre-millennial, but it's not the historic pre-millennial. That would be the dispensational pre-millennial.
Yes, dispensational.
And so
that's only been what that word means, but yes,
it's a lot more than just end times stuff. But like, it's only been around for about 120 years at this point. And the Left Behind stuff is what made it really popular.
Yeah,
but that's a whole nother episode to talk about dispensationalism.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think Left Behind made it popular. Maybe it did for your generation. I think Left Behind was a quantification of the things that I'd been taught.
Yes, that's probably true. Because you probably had like the Charles Ryrie like study Bible that would have been in a bunch of Southern Baptist churches at the time. And then when the Left Behind series came out, it was showing the end time side of the dispensational theology, right? So if we were to get into dispensational theology, there's a lot more to it, and that may be an episode worth that we would probably have to study before, but that'd be worth talking about at some point because it's what we both grew up in. I'm probably sure of.
In case we haven't said this before, we both grew up in what would probably be considered traditional Southern Baptist.
Yep.
Okay. With a church that had a pastor and a body of deacons.
Yep.
Yeah. And the deacons kind of were
they were kind of acting elders.
Yeah. Think of them as almost like a board of directors.
Board of directors is a good way of putting it.
Both spiritual and financial, but more financial than spiritual. And the pastor was the chairman of the board who kind of was supposed to be more spiritual.
Until the board members didn't like him or something happened.
That's right. And then they told him to get lost. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So we're coming from the same.
We're coming from the same background. So
okay.
This I'm sure will come out, but I have what's the word? I don't like dispensational. I grew up in dispensational theology, and I have a pretty strong affinity against it. I don't know what the word is for that.
Right.
Distaste for it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Bias, prejudice.
That's the word. Bias. I definitely have a bias towards that. So I know that I don't hold to the dispensational premillennial because that's more than just end time stuff when you talk about dispensationalism. And we don't have to get into the depths of dispensationalism, but
by the way, can I just interject for just a second?
Because I'm talking with my hands.
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Although this is a good chance to stop that. So, I went. We're going back and forth here. I went from this to this, and so I didn't notice how different it was until I went back.
This has a lot more caramelly kind of sweetness to it.
Yeah, and this is very fruity.
Right. Yep.
This is very fruity. Almost like the difference between like
someone from California
like some gum.
Or someone from Texas.
Like some fruit gum versus some some cinnamon gum or something.
So like the zebra.
Yes.
Zebra gum versus
like Big Red.
Big Red. There it is.
Don't get me wrong. This is not. You're not getting a whole lot of cinnamon out of this. I'm just saying the distinct difference.
Yep. I agree with
between those two. So sorry. Keep going.
So that's the pre-millennial dispensationalism. Historic dispensationalism, I shouldn't even talk about because I don't quite.
You don't know
most people that fall in the circles that I hang around are either historical pre-millennial, which I think my wife would probably. I shouldn't have said that. She's gonna be listening to this. Be like, I don't believe that. I think she would hold closer to that probably, but I know she goes back and forth. I've got a friend.
Yeah, Kathy, I just want you to know that Jason said he was going to try and throw you under the bus.
That's what
today.
So. I've got a good friend who's post-millennial. He might be the only person I've met in real life who's post-millennial, but he's also very charismatic and not charismatic in like a theological way, but as just a person.
I see.
So
he has a charismatic personality.
Yeah, so he makes me want to believe that just because of who he is. Anyway, and then I think a lot of people that are in my circles are probably amil. What I believe about the end times, I've never heard anybody else say it, so it can't be right, or nobody else as smart as me. So I think that the book of Revelation is intentionally difficult to understand. I think it is in the same way that you have the Old Testament saints who are writing scripture and they're foretelling the coming of Christ, right? But they don't really understand that. So I think that's the same sort of thing that's happening is we are not meant to understand Revelation until Christ returns. And then it's like, oh, that all makes sense, right? So when you see in Isaiah where it's talking about what now you're like, oh, that's clearly just talking about the crucifixion of Christ, right? Like this.
I understand what you're saying.
So, but at the time, Isaiah had no idea, had no concept of that's what it was. It was the Holy Spirit working.
Well,
I think that's what's happening.
He might know that there had to be some event of sacrificial value, but he didn't know what it actually meant.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Like, no way he knew all of those details lined up with all these other things, right? And we see that in is it in Hebrews that talks about how that describes that how the Old Testament saints were writing about things that were not revealed to them until later.
That's right.
And so I think that's what's happening in Revelation is it's intentionally difficult to understand. The way I like to describe it is it's shrouded in mystery.
Yeah.
I think intentionally so that not that we shouldn't study it, right? I think it's good to study it, but I don't know that it's healthy to land anywhere on it. And people from all aspects of like pre-mill, post-mill, amill, they're all yelling right now. They're like, no, you don't understand. Like when you study this much, I'm just saying that I think that's what the point of it is that we should still be studying it. We should still like it should point us to Christ.
By the way, that was not my dog, in case you heard that.
Yeah.
So keep going. I'm so sorry.
It was my dog and my baby that's been making noises in the background. I think that's the intention of it, right? I think it's supposed to. I think it's not revealed to us now. I think when Christ returns, we'll see it. We'll see it in the same way that I look at the Old Testament, and I'm talking with my hands like crazy today. You've been talking about how I always.
Yeah. In case you don't realize, as a teacher, I didn't realize how much I talked with my hands. So I told Jason after watching a couple episodes, I gotta like stop talking with my hands.
And I'm like, let me do it
Jason
for you.
He's
I'm landing
projecting a little bit for me. So here's what I think is interesting about what you just said. I said basically the same thing about the book of Genesis. That you're missing the point. It's supposed to be ambiguous to a certain extent, and that having an exact fixation on what it means is not the point.
That's interesting.
I mean, do you recall me making those points?
That's exactly what I'm thinking about. Now I'm thinking to myself, I was like, why do I think that about Revelation? I've never put that thought into Genesis. But it's interesting. I mean,
because at the end of the day, we are not. It's not important for us to figure out exactly what actions happened before. There are certain actions that we have to believe actually literally happened. Crucifixion, resurrection. But there's a lot of actions that could be somewhat symbolic, and it's okay for us to not necessarily believe they're literal. It doesn't mean they weren't literal. It's just beyond the point.
Yeah, and it goes back to like ultimately we should be looking at Scripture, not tradition.
That's right.
To tell us what those things are, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think as long as we are reading the Word, trying to understand the Word, then that is the ultimate goal in it.
I've often thought that the letters to the seven churches, right? Yeah. So Jesus writes letters to the seven churches, and John quantifies those letters in Scripture, right?
Yep.
And I think it's interesting. Maybe that was meant for the seven churches as they were in, AD
60. I have no idea.
I was going to say,
numbers,
I mean, it's somewhere in the latter portion of the first century, right?
Yep.
Somewhere between 60 and 90 AD. AD. That's right. So John's an old man. So maybe those letters are literally for those people, or maybe they're for the seven types of Christian believers that exist throughout the entirety of Christendom. I think there are definitely people that at times they can be part of the elect. We've talked about the elect in previous episodes. They can be part of the elect and still be Laodicean.
There's definitely the aspects of, because each church has its own thing that it's dealing with.
That's right. Each
one
church
of them,
has
one of them
an
he's
issue.
like, good job, but the others
That's
are
right.
like, you're not good at these
That's
things.
Right.
Yeah,
and so I think I've often thought, he's describing different aspects within being a Christian. There is one of each of the seven churches in your church. In fact, there's probably multiples of each of the seven churches in your church, because he's talking. So that's the way I perceive some of that stuff. He's talking to us individually about our own shortcomings with regard to how we love him and worship him and follow him.
Yeah.
And so when you get so focused on, well, I can't wait for this event to happen because I know that means these series of events will follow, or I can see in the past where these events have happened. You're missing the point. The point is that the book of Revelation, like the entire Bible, is telling you how to follow Christ better.
Yep.
Because probably the most profound thing is the idea that you need to, no man knows the day or the hour of his return, right? So the idea is to live every minute like he could be back. Like, are you always doing things that if he showed up right then, you'd be okay with him seeing? That, to me, that's the overarching idea, is that you're refining your actions and your thoughts by the ideals of these 7 churches, and by the ideals of what if he showed up in the sky right then. Mm-hmm. And now that doesn't preclude the idea that he will show up in the sky at any moment. And quite frankly, I'm totally okay with that idea. I'm not telling you that I ascribe to the. In fact, I will definitively say I don't ascribe to the way the Left Behind series assumes the end times will follow. I think there's certainly some good contextual evidence to suggest that John, for a portion of his revelation, was talking about the current Caesar of Rome. And so you could make a really good contextual argument that was the Antichrist that he was talking about.
Yep.
But that Antichrist lives on in
the Pope. Not my words, sis.
Well, I know I didn't say it. So I appreciate you turning off all of our Catholic brethren. I hope you understand. He says that tongue in cheek.
I don't hold to that. I do say seriously. There are people within the Reformed tradition. I don't mean Baptist Reformed. I mean like actual Reformed Presbyterian tradition.
So hold on. You should define what Reformed means, because I don't think we've actually addressed it.
Yeah,
Did you say the word?
Yeah, I did. We brought this up previously where I was like, we'll have to talk about that later because I don't like the word Reformed.
Okay.
Yeah, again, bias showing, right?
Yeah, you're biased.
So there's Reformed, in the Reformed tradition, typically would be the... people call themselves Reformed Baptists. There's no such thing as actual Reformed Baptists, right? When people say Reformed Baptists, they mean Calvinistic Baptists.
Right, that's what they mean.
Yeah, but Reformed has a lot of other things that go with it. There is I'm sure people... I love the sound of that. I'm sure people listening to this are familiar with the group that shall not be named, as it is called on Facebook. But there's this Facebook group called the Reformed Pub. It started out as a podcast, guys talking about beer and Calvinistic theology. One was a Baptist, one was a Presbyterian. One of them, the one that was Baptist, became a Presbyterian.
Why
This related.
We not been invited on that show?
Oh, it is so bad. Oh, the show. I don't think
it's bad. It's not good.
No, the show was fine. I don't think the show exists anymore. The Facebook group is not good.
Okay.
I left. I couldn't handle it anymore, and I can take a lot. I couldn't handle it. Anyway, so all of this may seem not related, but the point is, I guess what I'm trying to get at is I didn't understand what Reformed meant. Reformed to me just meant Calvinistic.
Right. I'll be honest with you. That's what I assumed you meant.
And honestly, that's what it means to most people in our circles, in Baptist circles. That's all it means. If you say Reformed outside of a Baptist circle, there's all of the things that people assume mean with it. Like one of them is the
less orthodox, maybe?
No, so like the what do they call it? The 2CV, a second commandment violation. So that means like you can't have pictures of Jesus because it is breaking the second commandment, because you're showing a picture. You shouldn't make
more orthodox.
Orthodox. Yeah,
I mean,
it's wrong.
Orthodox meaning like literal, or
kind of. I don't think that's literal.
Legalistic.
Legalistic would be fair. That's a word I would use. They would not like that word.
That's okay. I'm okay with them not liking that word.
Fair enough. If you're listening, if you're still listening, I'm sorry. But that's one of the things that, like, I'd never heard of that before, the second commandment violation. So they would see the second commandment as meaning you can't have pictures of Jesus. I remember I got in trouble once because I got on Photoshop. I opened up a blank white document and I put a little black dot. And then I posted it, and I said, "This is a picture of Jesus blinking in a snowstorm," and like he's covered in snow and whatever. And they freaked out. They banned I got put on like a 3-day mute. They took the post down because it was a picture of Jesus.
Okay, I just want to point out right now I have a tear running down my cheek.
Okay, good.
I'm just kidding.
This I'm getting way beyond the point. The point is reformed. The reformed means other things than what we think of. So it's the Reformed tradition, and including like infant baptism, all of that stuff.
Okay. When
you're talking about a Reformed church, but in Baptist circles, Reformed usually just means Calvinistic.
Calvinistic.
And anyway,
that would be my expectation. If you told me that your church was Reformed, I would assume that's just a nice way of saying you're Calvinist.
And that's in Baptist circles, that's what everybody is meaning.
But outside of Baptist circles, you're saying it has a broader context.
Yes. If you were to be hanging out with a Presbyterian and you say that you're Reformed and they didn't know you were Baptist, there's going to be a lot of other assumptions that go with that.
I see.
So because of that,
they're going to think, ironically enough, we'll use this word that we used in a recent episode. They're going to think you are super fundamentalist about certain things.
Yeah, or that whether it's fundamentalist or not, it's just that Reformed means more than Calvinistic. It means these 5-6 other things as well, right?
Okay, fair enough.
Anyway, sorry, that was again bias. I mean, look, clearly my bias is showing. I had some not great.
Your bias is showing. Stop it, Jason.
Stop it. Anyway, where were we going with that?
This is the point of the podcast where we wish we had a producer that could get us
they'd be like, oh, this is where you were. We Googled this. We talked about Reformed. I think a lot of the Reformed people are on mill that we were talking about in times.
I was pointing out that I think when you try to ascribe specific actions to specific parts of the scripture, you're missing the point.
Yeah.
So, and from there, you jumped on the Reformed aspect. But I think what you're really trying to suggest is they have very specific, almost legalistic beliefs.
Yeah, and, I don't know if legalistic is even the right word. It's just different beliefs. Like, I think I see the way that they interpret infant baptism, right? There's plenty of people who listening to this are going to hold to infant baptism, and that's okay. You're still a believer. We can still fellowship together.
Sure, of course.
Probably going to go to a different church because we're not going to baptize babies,
right?
Because the Bible doesn't say you should. But the point is, like, that's
Jason
okay.
Allison in Missouri City, ladies and gentlemen.
So
you can cut that out, Jason.
You're giving away my address. So the point is, we can still fellowship together, right? But there are ways that we're going to interpret things differently, and But the reason I don't know why I brought up the Reformed thing, but it came up again, whatever. I don't like the word Reformed because I think it does hold connotations that are different depending on the circles you're running in, right?
Well, that's real similar to the word fundamentalist. So in a previous episode, we talked about Genesis, and I said I'm a fundamentalist, and Jason off air was like, dude, you don't believe anything that the fundamentalists believe. And so it's all about how you contextualize the stereotype that goes with the word, right?
Yeah, if we're not defining our terms, then it can get... I mean, so that's what happened with the Calvinistic thing, right? Is like we have different interpretations of what that means.
Right. In fact, it's why you think most Christians are actually Calvinists. They just don't know it because they refuse to be defined by the caricature that is the term Calvinist.
Yeah.
But they ascribe to most of the basic principles that Calvin put forth in his beliefs.
Yeah, so. That's probably fair. And one last thing that I would want to say that is not important at all, but it's just a pet peeve of mine is, since we're talking about Revelation, when people this is not related at all. When people talk about the Lord's Day, people refer to Sunday as the Lord's Day, right? Have you heard that before?
Sure. Yeah.
That shows up.
That's why we, in theory, we worship on Sunday.
Because people decided that we should call that the Lord's Day.
Right.
And it only shows up in Scripture one time, and it's in the book of Revelation, and it's when John is having his vision. He's caught up in a vision on the day of the Lord's Day. So, like, that's the only time we see that phrase used.
So it's not necessarily any specific day of the week. In fact, it could simply be the one day in history that is the Lord's Day.
Or it could be that he's having this vision about the future when Christ returns.
That's what I mean.
Which is the day. Yeah, exactly.
Which is that one day in history.
Which could be a Tuesday. Like,
right. Right.
Anyway.
It's some one day in history that could be the Lord's Day.
Yeah.
But it probably doesn't refer to a regular day of the week that is supposed to be the Lord's
So
Day.
there is I'm not saying we shouldn't meet for church on Sundays. I think there is a tradition of that.
Sure.
I think there's freedom to not do that.
Well, I mean, like when God says, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy.
Oh, that's the next episode.
Yeah.
Let's get on that. Sorry, go ahead.
But I mean, what is the Sabbath?
It's a Saturday.
The Sabbath? Is it a Saturday? I mean,
in Spanish, sábado is. I mean, it's literally that's how you say Saturday.
Right. I understand.
Sorry,
I
it's
can
another
appreciate that Spanish people interpret that as such. But my point is, like, again, we're talking about taking things literal versus understanding the intent behind them.
Yeah. Which I guess it's
what if in modern times my schedule dictated that we're chasing a rabbit a little bit here, but
which is fun.
It is. I like rabbit. It tastes good. Okay, sorry. But if my schedule dictated that I worked Wednesday through Sunday, and every Monday I spent the entirety of the day worshiping God because that was the first day that I had to rest, to worship God. Or even better, on every Monday, I took care of all the stuff around my house. And on Tuesday, after I've worked 6 days hard, because I'm doing everything as I do as unto Christ, if I sit there and worship Christ on Tuesday, am I sinning because I'm not able to worship with a group of believers? Or even better yet, what if I find another group of people who also worship on Tuesday and we're all believers?
I really want to answer this.
No. I think it's definitely a good conversation.
That should 100% be the next conversation.
That's right.
I will say that. So my issue with saying the Lord's Day, which again, this is not important by any means, right? You can call it that if you want. It's weird to me that we've started calling Sunday the Lord's Day when, as far as I can tell, so it's only in Scripture one time, and it's only in Revelation. And as far as I can tell, there's no suggestion that it's even a Sunday. Like maybe it is, but to me it seems like he's talking about the day
Christ comes
the
back.
day of the Lord when
Right.
Christ returns. So sure, you can call it that, but it seems weird to me that we're calling it that because we think it was a Sunday, and then now that's the whatever.
Right. Well,
which that's a different conversation from the Christian Sabbath, which is
it's
a good
like a
conversation.
lot of the Bible. People will preempt the actual meaning so they can co-opt it to mean what they want it to mean, and they're justifying. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are certainly instances of people using the Bible appropriately, but there's also plenty of instances of people co-opting the Bible to say what they want it to say.
It's only happened once or twice in history.
Yeah. So
anyway,
all right.
I really want to do another episode and talk about the Sabbath now, but I won't. I'm going to try to hold it in.
Well, that's going
to be a fun episode.
Sounds like you guys should tune in for our next episode. It sounds like we're going to talk about the Sabbath and Sunday, maybe. Maybe it won't be chronologically our next episode,
who knows?
But we'll talk about it soon. It sounds like a fun discussion topic, especially for a guy who has apparently taken a Nazirite vow and then drinks whiskey besides that.
We go knock over some pillars. Right now.
I don't think so.
No,
but,
okay.
Anyway, I will tell y'all this one time. So I used to be on church staff. This is a funny anecdote.
Okay, I like those.
And you can always cut it out if you need to,
nope,
Jason.
it's staying in.
So I used to be on church staff, and I would get to church very early when I was on staff. And one day it was just me and the pastor, and we used to like to, in a loving way, trade barbs. Trading barbs can be, especially among men, can be a loving way to kind of spar.
Endearment.
That's right. And I said something, and I don't remember what I said, but I zinged him. It was a zing, and he knew he was zunged.
He got zunged.
That's right.
Okay.
And he looked at me and said, "Now I know what the Philistines felt after they faced Samson. And I looked at him and I said, how? He goes, slain by the jawbone of an ass. And that was, you know,
I like that.
I don't know what else to say. I was dumbfounded.
He had that ready for any time he had.
Of course he did,
because that fits
but
with everything.
It was great coming from my lead pastor, my senior pastor, because I had never expected such a thing, and it was so poignant. Because in that moment, I was an ass.
You got zunged. That's what happened.
That's right. He did what we like to call, he doubled down on the zing. So nonetheless, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe. Next time, or sometime soon in the future, we'll be talking about the Sabbath and what that means. Sounds like an interesting conversation between Jason and I. And don't forget to be filled with the Spirit, and also from time to time some other spirits. So that's right. Filled with the Spirit.
Power. All right, we'll see you. Bye.
Thank you.